Welcome everyone. My name is Iris Yee. I'm Meow, Burning Man Project's head of the regional network. I'm super stoked and excited that you've accepted this invitation to learn with us. At our collective best, this is what folks in Burning Man Project believe. Burning Man is a multicultural, open and inviting and inclusive global community. And what we've been hearing from community members across different Burning Man teams, different places in the world, groups, collectives, theme camps, artists, that many of our teams and our projects and initiatives and processes in our community are missing some input and leadership from people who belong to conventionally marginalized communities. And we're hoping by bringing an anti-discriminatory, anti-racist lens into some of our strategies of work, we're hoping that we can build the future and the world that we want to live, work, and play in. So the journey to building these more diverse, burner, and inclusive spaces and places and gatherings may seem super challenging. And we've put some of the sort of commitments that Burning Man Project has made to build these type of spaces in Black Rock City, and hope to welcome our global community in the Burning Man Project R.I.D.E pledge, which you'll see a link dropped into in the chat. Today, we'll be hearing from one team, a very core team in Black Rock City, the Rangers, and specifically the R.I.D.E delegation, and how they're approaching doing this work. And later, we'll have an opportunity to have a Q&A to talk about the intricacies of that work and how they're approaching this within the Black Rock City Rangers. And also, there'll be an opportunity for group share out about what your team is doing, how you're approaching R.I.D.E work, and maybe some tools and resources that could benefit everyone in this group. And now, knowing that some of these conversations might be challenging, I would love for us to have a moment to connect in smaller groups. I'm going to ask our tech mod, KT, to divide us all into groups of 3. And I would love for you to discuss amongst yourselves what or who is keeping you rooted, means real or honest, in this inquiry, in this journey around radical inclusion, diversity, equity. So we'll have about 9 to 10 minutes in the breakout room. I hope that you had a chance to share out about what's keeping you real and honest in this inquiry around R.I.D.E. However, you're doing this work through a Black Rock City team, through your regional contacts or regional events in the world. I'm curious if anybody besides Rooster, who we didn't have an opportunity to record, wanted to share out just like one thing that they heard or learned that really struck them in their breakout room about this inquiry.
All right, real quick. So in my breakout group, we had a person, Andy, who is one of the main persons who's working on, is it Kiwi Burn? Is that the name of it? In New Zealand. And I just sort of made this comment that he's been working with the local Iwi tribe people because this event happens on their land. And I just sort of made this joke. It's like, well, you know, you gotta have to work with the local people, because if you offend them, they'll just kick you off the land. And next thing you know, you're holding your event in a parking structure. So it's like, that's why it helps to get along with the local people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And Pixelace, your hand, feel free to share, and then we'll wrap and go.
I just wanted to tag on because I was in that room too. And so the takeaway that I got from Andy was just shifting the focus from maybe not so much how are we just inviting and trying to switch our culture to make it palatable to the minority groups that we want to include, but are we actually participating in their communities? And he shared how they go to the iwi maybe art events and really have developed relationships that way by outward efforts. So I liked that.
Hi, in my breakout room, I was speaking with Lady Mac from the Netherlands, and we had a really interesting conversation about how a lot of the efforts that are going out with RIDE and whatnot are very US centric, and just she was expressing a lot of interest in like bringing that kind of bringing the concept, but trying to make it a little bit more directed towards the issues that they're facing in the Netherlands. And that was really like really awesome idea, like in my opinion. So that was cool to hear.
I'm so glad you brought that sort of or highlighted that perspectives and how your geography and might impact how you define inclusion and diversity. And in other forums, like the ones that the regional network team have posted in different cities in Europe, but the conversations we hear sometimes, which I'm not sure if this is also what Lady Mac's thinking, people have shared they define inclusion and as far as with their regional event design in terms of economic and class and accessibility. And for those specific regional communities, that's what comes like first to mind, and how they're trying to design that event experience for folks who are differently abled and regarding and also due to economic class. Well, I'd like for us to take a moment and welcome two folks who are part of the Black Rock City Ranger R.I.D.E delegation, Ranger Elephant and Threepio, who I've had the pleasure to hear a really great framework and just eloquently shared at a recent Black Rock City Event Operations Summit. And it was one of the most sort of very thorough frameworks I've heard from any burner team about how they're approaching RIDE. I would love for them to share this with you. Just for a little background, Threepio is an advisory member of the Black Rock Ranger Council, working in this space, RIDE space. He has extensive experience with both volunteer coordination and event operations in a range of burner and non-burner contexts, volunteering with a number of regional burns, including an upcoming event in Seattle. Ranger Elephant, whom you might know as Marlon Williams, who actually spoke at our forum last year, is a public servant and organizer who is extremely skilled in leading the transformation of public institutions to center equity to create a more just world. And he serves as an advisor on organizational system change initiatives for a number of groups. And we are super fortunate to have both of them here today to share out about the RIDE framework that the Black Rock City Rangers are undertaking and exploring. So welcome, Threepio and Elephant.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, there's a little bit of background noise. We got like Passover and kids and all the things going on right now. So I'm going to be presenting a little bit around the work that we've been doing in Rangers and the RIDE work in general. My hope is that you're able to leave today with a sense of not just what RIDE aspires to be, but what it looks like in practice if you try to implement and operationalize those pieces. So that's my hope for you, and you guys will tell me in about 20-25 minutes or so how well we did with that. 3PO, anything to add before I jump in?
No, I encourage you all to get out your pens and papers and write down little nuggets of quotes that Elephant is going to give you. He's a wonderful storyteller, so I encourage you all to listen generously.
Now I feel like there are like high expectations and I'm gonna blush. So can you see my awkward Google Slides sheet? Have nodding heads. All right, great. So I went to Burning Man and about 11 years ago, and I'm like, this is fucking awesome, and I really appreciate like all the things, and I was like, but I'm not really an artist, so like, what's going to be my Burning Man art project? And I got really obsessed with the Burning Man principles, and I fell onto the principle around radical inclusion, and there was a time when I was every time I came to Burning Man, it was pretty much to escape a world where Black men were being killed by the police. And so I wanted to figure out like where could I go to the place where I could feel like safe and beautiful. and Burning Man was it. And so in many ways, I turned my life and my career into Burning Man Project, which is essentially about creating more spaces where people of color can feel beautiful. And I want to make sure that, in particular, Black Rock City is a place for that. If you go by the numbers, it's not doing a great job so far. The Black population is less than 1%. We get rounded up to 1, which is really sad. So, like, rounded up to 1% just to make the numbers easier. But it's a very low percentage given the number of, like, Black people in the world, and particularly the diversity in general that you have in the places from where burners come from. So thinking about, like, how do we actually make the radical inclusion not just something that's like radical inclusion for white folks who felt marginalized from other parts of, like, white society, but actually be radical inclusion in all the ways, race, gender, ability, sexuality, all the different pieces. Like, there's nothing radical that's ever really happened in America that didn't include all the leadership and of folks of color, of people from marginalized populations who, by nature of who they are and where they exist in society, are the ones who are best positioned to dream about building a better world. And part of why we build Black Rock City is that we're trying to rebuild our vision of what a better city and a better world could be. And so to do that, or to aspire to do that without having full radical inclusion, is a project that really will never be fruitful. So that's part of why I'm engaged in this. And my art project is to make a world that's a little bit more colorful, and to make sure that our city that we love is one that's more colorful in and of itself. I have the privilege, I have the privilege of working with, oh, hold on one second. Camila, daddy's on the job. Okay, thank you. uh, so I have the privilege of also being part of the Black Rock Rangers and being able to work with them as part of the custodians who help hold the container for the city that we're trying to create. And one of the things that we know is that Burning Man is becoming more diverse, and so it's incumbent on us to make sure that we can do that work. So what I'm going to do today is give you a little arc of what the journey we've taken, and hopefully it can inspire you about what you can take. And Threepio will be laying out some of the goals and the updates on what we've done so far. So let's start at the beginning. Context. We had the R.I.D.E pledge, which was put out in August 2020, Meow gave you a little bit of overview of those pieces. But the key phrase I want to really focus on is that we're working to expand the participation of BIPOC communities and to foster diversity in our policies, programs, and processes within our organization and within our events. So there's an active effort to try and make radical inclusion, that principle, be more felt in the spaces in which we occupy and within the city that we create. I also try to remember that Black Rock City is just one of the many cities of Burning Man. We have the Lakes on Fire and Loveburn and all the other burns that are happening. Those are all satellite cities. We may be at Black Rock City, a capital, but there are other places where we are upholding, building, recreating, and exploring and navigating this culture. And particularly when it comes to radical inclusion, I think some of the regionals are doing it way better than Black Rock City is doing. And so I think there's things to be learned from the regional. So it's not like a reporting out, but it's actually an exchange of information. So I hope you know that we're coming to you in that spirit, an exchange of information, because I do think that the innovation within our larger society is really one that's going to come from the regional. So that's why I think it's really important to be here and to present with you all here. So when make Black Rock City blacker, and we also know that for the Rangers in particular, they're recognizing that Black Rock City is going to be more diverse, and that there's needed to be a response in how we do that work. And if the role of the Rangers, like, we are the, like, social custodians of the space, we help to make sure that there's a safe container in a way so that people can express themselves, they can live out the principles and the values in the best way. We won't make sure you don't get hurt, but we make sure you don't die. This is a big kind of part of our thing, because we want this community to continue. And if we know that the community is becoming more diverse over time, it is incumbent on the Rangers to adapt and modify and change in ways that make sure that we're able to have that diversity be an asset, and that we as a ranger department, which is primarily a lot of white guys, are able to really adjust and work with the new participants in a way that's useful and make sure that we have a beautiful opportunity and engagement for all people. So that's why it's important for the Rangers to be engaged in this work. Another reason why it's important for it to be engaged is that a key idea around racial equity is this idea of social capital, right? So, and that's how the Rangers work. The Rangers, essentially how we do is because we wear our funny little outfits and we walk around, we can tell people to do things, to fix things, to move things, to make friends, to mediate disputes. All of that is really built on the social capital that we have. And social capital is just really another form of power. And when we talk about racial equity and equity in any way, power is the ability to shape the world around you. And so so how it comes together is that if we are custodians of helping to shape the world of Black Rock City in a way that's more in alignment with our principles, we are working and navigating with power. And therefore we have the responsibility and the opportunity to engage in work that will lead towards greater equity so that all people, everyone, regardless of their identity, has the ability to create the world in Black Rock City and hopefully beyond that they would want to live in. And so that's part of why working with power is really important, and understanding that it's not just about the existing power, but shifting it over time. What are the little changes you can make so that you're making a situation so that it centers those who have been marginalized. It can't be radical. It can't be radical and just recreate what happens everywhere else in the world. Being radical is to actually dream about something that a different way of being, and to aspire. You don't always get there, but to aspire to try and be and live in a different way. And if we want to say that radical inclusion, if we want to say Burning Man is a radical space, then that is the thing that we have to be doing and living and moving in towards. So how did that all happen? I would say it happened because Threepio gave me a call or an email. I think it was an email. And that's and I want to actually, sorry, step back 1 second. My background is that I'm a racial equity consultant. I work in cities all across the country. I've been a consultant to about 40 plus cities across the United States, working with mayors on their racial equity plans. So I've seen a cross section of America and how they've tried to do this work. But Black Rock City is one of the cities that I love, and so I've kind of taken it on unofficially or as one of my cities to bring some of that work and expertise that I've learned from many others, different groups, so I can give you their background information. So it's not all me; it's things that I've learned from other places, but bringing it into Black Rock City. I had the fortune of being able to meet Threepio, who's also been doing a lot of internal organizing, kind of trying to think different things about how do we share leadership and how do we engage in power, how do we structure things so that folks experience both as volunteers and as participants in the city are more impactful and better. And so we were able to come together, and like I said, we gathered a small group of interested folks who wanted to do the work. We shared what we knew about racial equity and diversity. We read through the pledge. We did some of the workshops. I want to thank Nexus. Your workshop is amazing. Just period. And we talked about what we knew and we talked about what we didn't know. We also identified who was in the room, like who are our friends, who are our networks. Just like Rooster was saying before, like Burning Man kind of started and it kind of grew based on the network of people. But if your network kind of looks like you, it's hard to get diversity. Without intention, you have to be intentional and ask the questions of like, who's in this room? We don't have any Black women in this room. We don't have any folks with this identity in this room. How can we reach out and expand our network to include those folks? And what are we losing by not having them here? And being really conscious about that so that we're not making generalizations and that we're actively trying to expand our numbers. it was also really important for us to create a common language. We did a lot of work. I remember like Rooster did some amazing work in trying to identify exactly what intersectional identities are. What do we mean when we say racism? What do we mean when we say prejudice? Getting clear about our definitions means that we actually have a shared language that we're using to talk to each other about what we mean when we say different things. And that's really critical. Like I would say anyone who wants to create a working group around doing RIDE work, your first meeting, 2 meetings, 3 meetings should really be just like throwing out words and making sure you all have a similar understanding of what that means, because I've often seen work go forward where people are talking about different things. It's talking about the same words, but actually meaning very different things. But when you do that, you take the time to do that, it's going to be really powerful. Threepio had a giant Google Doc where he was just writing down all the different things that we're using and its various definitions. And I still go back to that to make sure we're saying the right things, and that we mean the same things when we're talking. So that's just a little bit of like the process that we went through. After we like knew we were using the same words, we set out some crazy goals. Like, what would it look like if we were like the model of radical inclusion as our department? What might that look like? And we threw out like a bunch of, I think we had like 50 something different, oh no, it was like 30 something different like ideas that we laid out. Also, radical inclusion will be brought about by Google spreadsheets and documents, just in case you know. Um, it doesn't bode well for decommodification, but like that's literally how we did this. Um, and so what we did is we put out all these different ideas, and then we look through and say like, what's feasible, what's kind of crazy, what's a stretch goal, and what can we actually get done for this upcoming burn, for the burn after that, and categorize them that way. And that was a really clarifying, because we started out being like, here's all 30 crazy things. And we're like, actually, 20 of these things are not entirely that crazy. And we might be able to do them in this year if we just break them up into these pieces. And then the 10 things that remained, like we could understand how we were building the foundation towards that work. So crazy goals don't seem so crazy once you put them on paper. And what we're able to pull out is like, here are the things we can move on. Here are some things we could do in the next week, in the next month, in the next couple of months. And we started to build support around that work, like get other people on board. We had more people joining the team. We took things to be like, this is a crazy idea. You all should do this, and kind of outsource it. You're not responsible for changing the world by yourself. So find other folks who can do it, and get some easy wins. It's not all like going up the mountain. Some things you could do really quickly. We can change some definitions here and be like, hey, we spent time figuring out what intersectional means. Let that be now the definition for our entire department. So everybody is using that, and it actually expands the lens of 1,000 people, right? And that's really was merely just taking this conversation, putting it down on paper, and putting it into the manual. Little things like that are really easy wins that actually do a lot. And so identifying those things. Um, Understanding that some things will stall. That's just part of the process. Not every idea is a great idea. That's why we do Burning Man, so we can take apart the city and get rid of all those things that didn't work, and or try to make them better. And it's really about persisting and learning, doing reflection. What worked, what didn't work? How did we move forward? What didn't move forward? And realizing that as we were doing this process, we were changing the department within which we worked, but also realizing that we were changing ourselves as individuals, learning more, building connections, building friendships, and getting a chance to grow ourselves. Racial equity work is not something that's just like you do with it to an organization, but it's actually something that happens um, to you in your own journey. So just letting you be aware that you're going to change through this process too, and that's actually one of the benefits of it all. So that's the like how of it, right? Like we got together, we got clear about our definitions, we set some goals, we tried some stuff didn't work, a lot of things did, and then we just kept iterating from there, and with an intention around building community. We started from like 2 to 4 to 5 to now there's like probably about 20 people working on different parts of this agenda all together. So just wanted to give you a sense of like how it happens. Really, you just find another person and then they find another person, bring them in and get them tangled up. And from there, we were able to create some RIDE goals. So I'm gonna let Threepio go through a little bit of the goals, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit about some of the things that people kind of can stop you and how you can move forward through them.
Thanks, Elephant. So yeah, we wanted to kind of set our own departmental goals that kind of outline for us as a department. And this certainly, you can set your own set of goals that outline how, say, a regional organization or some department within a regional organization, or even just an art project, like what do you want to achieve? So number one at the top, we wanted to support Burning Man's RIDE anti-racism pledge, not just in theory, but with actual policies and procedures that we're going to implement. Number two, we talked about fostering a culture of safety around discussions of intersectionality and systemic oppression. And there's a reason why this is number two. Elephant will talk a little bit more later about making the space and how important it is to kind of socialize and make space for people to engage with this content, especially people who are hesitant to engage with this content. It's really important, no matter where you are in the world, just kind of make this normal. It goes back to our previous point about having shared language. So that's definitely high on our list. After that, beyond just making space to discuss it, to make sure that the actual tenets of anti-racism and anti-discrimination are understood by our volunteers and enacted in all aspects of our work. And Black Ranger Department works both on Playa very visibly, but also year round, kind of getting ready for the event. And it's not very tenable to have a department that is, even if it's a diverse department in person, if it doesn't really hold up those tenets the rest of the year, it doesn't work so well. So, and then, at the end of the day, there's going to have to be some data at some point. So we want to have measurable progress towards what we call a durably diverse group of volunteers, including increased representation in leadership positions in particular, right? And the Ranger Department has struggled over the years with diverse demographics. It's not something that we're strong on today. And this is kind of the big challenging, how do we even do that kind of goal? But it should be here, right? Otherwise, we're not even trying. And I wanted to just dive into the word durably a little bit. We've seen in the past, certainly in the Rangers, but also in other organizations, you can recruit people into your organization that add a little bit of diversity. They add new backgrounds, they add new experiences. But if those people have a bad experience, or if they just don't feel welcome at the table, they may leave after a year, 6 months, or 2 years. It's not really changing the roadmap. It's not changing what your organization looks like. So it's really about bringing folks in and making them feel durably welcome, making them feel like they are actually a part of the community, because they are. You want them to stick around and change the scope of the whole organization, not just come in and be tokenized right away. And then lastly, this is really underlining all of these, we really need to seek and incorporate feedback from the underrepresented and marginalized groups, whether they are actually Rangers or whether they are people entirely outside of our community, to make sure that what we are doing is upholding the spirit of RIDE, both for our own community, but also for the broader community that we're supporting. Both that means Burning Man, but also potentially members of the public who say wouldn't go to Burning Man because they've seen the Rangers and we're overwhelmingly white, for example. If we're scaring them off of the overall community, we're really not doing the RIDE work.
Thank you for that. And so we set up those goals. I remember then we took a break and we're just like, wow, there's a lot in there, right? There's a lot of work to do. And this is usually the point where hopefully as you go on your journey, you find your team, you bring folks together, and you start to do to set up your goals. You'll get some questions. And so this is my list of how to approach all the different questions. So take a breath, and the first thing you get is going to be the what abouts. It's like, well, what about all these other things, right? What about gender? What about sexuality? And my kind of approach to that is to take a race and approach to the work. all, when you think about intersectionality, all the different things, we're not just our race, we're not just our gender, we're not just our class. We need to find the intersection of all those different pieces. But what we know, at least in the American context, how things are structured, that like in all of these things, like when you work on race, you can expand out to all the other parts of our identities. So when you start other places, it doesn't have the same impact. That's me looking at about 20 years of racial equity work in different cities. Some cities are like, let's start with class. And they start with class and they work on class issues for decades, but they never get to race. Or they'll start on working on the gender equity issues, but they actually never get to, well, they never get that far to gender equity issues. They never get to class, or they actually make class issues worse, and they never get to race. But when places start by working on race and then expand from there, they get to all the other pieces. So that's just what the data has shown us about like which is the best place to start if you want to have an encompassing and intersectional approach to the work. It's also important to be guided by the 10 principles. The 10 principles are actually pretty great. It's a little weird, but I go into like random cities and talking to the mayor. I'm like, have you heard about this Birdie Band thing and consider making 10 principles for Philadelphia? And they're like, no. And then actually Philadelphia is trying. It's really weird, but city of Philadelphia is considering having like principles of brotherly love that they're going to incorporate based on a random thing I said at a dinner party to the mayor about the principles of Burning Man. So we'll see if that becomes a thing. But having principles is something that even if you have different ideas or beliefs or whatever, you can always have shared values and principles, even if you interpret them differently. And as a way in which to bring people together. Another really important thing, and if anybody makes stickers, you need to make the sticker. Less fucked is still better. A lot of times we don't do the work because we're trying to make it perfect. We want to be the most perfect ally. We want to be the most perfect anti-racist thing. And so we don't move forward because we're seeking perfection. But actually making the world a little less fucked up is still a worthwhile thing to be engaged in doing. And so just even if you do a small thing, less fucked is still better. Using a racial equity analysis to things is really important because it helps you to see all the different opportunities for making the world less fucked. And that's really a powerful piece. And there's a lot of resources. Racial equity tools.org is one of my favorite places to go to find resources on how to use an equity analysis in different types of spaces. You got to build capacity. We know build and unearth capacity. A lot of times there are people in this journey who've like shown up to RIDE meetings to be like, hey, I happen to be like a crisis intervention person with this specialty. And we're like, wow, that's exactly what we need in order to like figure out this next big question that we have. So Playa Magic applies to racial equity. People will, you'll find that you already know people who with untapped into skill set that will help move your work forward. It is your job to work in bringing them together and making invitation to be engaged in this work, be vocal about what you're doing, and the people with the skills for what you need will show up. It sounds really trite, but you've all experienced Playa Magic, like you know it's a thing, and it's a thing that applies to the work of racial equity. Talk a little bit about the tools. You need to have some data so you know that what you're doing is actually creating the change that you want. And partnership. That's why Threepio and I are here. We want to partner with you all. What happens at Black Rock City is not the be all and end all of burner learning. Being in the regionals, there's things that you guys get a chance to do better, to experiment with that we need to bring back to Black Rock City. So I think sometimes people are like, oh, we're going to the Big Burn to learn things. I'm like, no, actually, the Big Burn needs to learn things from the regionals. And so just really excited to be here in community with you all and always operate with urgency and accountability. We build cities that disappear. We've been waiting in the American context for 400 years for us to build a better world, and so the time to do that is yesterday. And so we're really trying to do this work with some agency and accountability because the world is changing. Our communities are diversifying, and we want to make sure like Threepio said, that like as that change happens, as we come out through a pandemic, and people are looking for more spaces where they can be free, that we are a place that invites everyone and that we're fully in alignment with that radical inclusion goal that we set up for ourselves. So that was a lot of talking. And you're like, okay, there's a lot of things to remember. And how do you remember it? I made a chart for you. Or not myself, but working with the Alliance for Racial Equity, for Race Forward, and the Center for Social Inclusion, which are places I used to work for. We created this like three-part way of like moving forward racial equity. First is to normalize. So that's like shared analysis, shared definitions, urgency, all that type of thing that we talked about before. Normalize conversations about race. Get people in the practice of having the conversations and make sure when they say they're talking about a thing, they mean the same thing. The second part is organize. This is a people movement. This is about movement building. You want to build the internal structures, you want to build partnerships, you want to make friends, you want to pull together your groups internally so that they can feel a sense of solidarity and not feel isolated. And that's also a matter of building power to create the change that you want to do. And after you've done those two things, you want to operationalize, try things out, make some crazy goals, and try to implement it. I try to assure people that most of this is not actually doing anything radically different. This is the part where I encourage people to drop the radical part. It's doing the work that your department has always done, that you have always done all the time, but just adding a racial equity power analysis and lens. What does this look? If I do my job, how do I do the job of being a ranger? How do I do the job of whatever it is that I contribute to Burning Man in a way that can bring in and create a smile for people of color, for folks who may have different mobility needs, for folks who may be of different other types of identities. How can I do what I do, but bring into focus folks with different identities, privileges, and abilities than mine? And you can just use that to extend that work. So with that, we're going to switch into some of the concrete actions that we took. Threepio will walk you through that, and then we'll have time for questions.
Thanks, Elephant. So I'm just going to give you some examples now. And certainly I want to call out, something that Elephant said a couple times, we're the Black Rock Rangers. We're talking about this in the context of a huge event. And we're also talking about this in a Ranger context. And so the next couple of slides, really just examples of ways that we thought we could achieve our goals. Your examples are going to be completely different. Some of these examples, as we previously said, are really wild goals that we thought pie in the sky, there's no way this can happen, but we're going to write it down anyways. There are no bad ideas, right? And some of these are very small things where if you can make a little bit of progress, people feel empowered, they feel like they're being supported. So in terms of normalizing, right? We talked earlier about that second goal of making conversations available. So that's one of our first initiatives, is to engage the Ranger community in conversations about race and how we do our jobs as Rangers. We've empowered a group of about half a dozen people to go forth and self-organize, form their own group, form their own facilitation techniques, gather tools, and then schedule conversations. And so they're just having I think it's more than monthly now, they're having these Zoom sessions that people can drop into, and have a nice, honest conversation. Another one of these is just engaging the Ranger leadership in any kind of participation we can. So if you, for example, if you're an RC, how can you reach out to other people in your region to empower them, right? And make sure that they have support and make sure that they're understanding how the RIDE goals fit with things that are going on. Supporting Ranger participation with RIDE tools and resources. The Burning Man organization has put together so many wonderful RIDE tools and resources, which are on the website and available through Hive. A lot of the people who've created those resources are here in this breakout session today, and I want to acknowledge them. Nexus is one of those, Iris, Elephant, other folks here have been super critical in that, so that's wonderful. And then supporting outreach with regional Ranger orgs. Well, we haven't even started that, but here we are today by virtue of being invited. Thank you so much for having us. We definitely want to talk to other regions and regional Ranger orgs in particular about that. Moving on to the organized piece. So then we wanted to get together a group of people to work on this, right? A lot of the volunteers in our community are busy trying to make Burning Man happen again. I'm sure most of the volunteers in your community are busy trying to make your regional burns happen again, perhaps for the first time in a few years. So finding people that have energy to work on RIDE and aren't splitting their time or are willing to split their time, that's really important. We got together a group of about 10. That feels like about the right size, but your group may be different. Doing cross-departmental reach out to find out who else is working on this. What can we learn from them, right? And that also means to regionals, like what other communities are already working on these, grappling with these. Oftentimes the people that we talk to aren't working. They're just starting to work and they have questions. And even just reaching out to people who haven't started and have questions, that moves us forward because answering their question teaches us a lot about what we've already done. This deck that we're presenting to you today is different than it was 2 weeks ago as a result of so many questions that we got. Developing and supporting emergent Ranger affinity groups. This is something that we've been trying to do for a long time, but we're doing it more now. So we have a subgroup of Rangers we can call the BIPOC Rangers. We already have a group called the Women of Khaki. Giving people an opportunity to share space as we do on the Hive platform where we've got the POC burner groups, right? Places where people can share space and just talk with each other and feel welcome within their own community. It's really important. It's one thing to say we have a diverse community, but allowing everybody to experience their own identity is really important. And then operationalize. A lot of people rush to this last step, and we put it last for a reason here. I think it's easy to start with these things, but sometimes it's better to get the other two first. So I'll just say like doing the normalize and the organize are very, very important. Don't forget those. Once we get into the operationalize, like what are the procedures and policies that we want to change? Well, I want to develop and adopt a framework for recovery from micro and macro aggressions. I actually want to work with somebody in this call, Nexus. I want to work with you on that later because we have Rangers that commit microaggressions, right? Burners do this all the time. What happens after that? There's going to be some shame and some fear, and like we need a way to recover from that. Applying a RIDE lens to our intake teams, right? Like how do we make sure that people who are volunteering for our organization, how do we make sure that we're embracing them, embracing their opportunities, embracing their experiences, and making sure that our intake teams, our trainers, our mentors, our recruiting people, our volunteer coordinators, making sure they have the understanding of power dynamics and the histories around marginalized populations. So they're not just committing microaggressions themselves, which of course push the community away. Assessing our resources and reallocating resources based on an equity framework. This is a really hard one. I want to underscore that. This is scary to people, scary to the bean counters in our organizations. It's hard. It's worth trying for sure. Weaving anti-racism and radically inclusive elements into our leadership best practices. Everything from just like, if you're going to have people get together in a meeting, maybe at the beginning of the meeting, ask, who's not here today? Are we missing some people who aren't here, who are normally here, and then we're not hearing their voices? Are there people who aren't, say, part of our board? Are there voices that are just not on our board that we're never going to hear from a woman? We're never going to hear from a person of color if there are none of them on the board. So that's a really key one. And then last up, measure what we care about. Let's develop strategies that can drive results, and we need data to do that. So yeah, go ahead, Elephant.
So the thing I try to remember is that like, why do we go to the desert? We go to the desert because we all want an awesome story to tell about like what we did last summer, right? And in that journey, like the journey of racial equity is also one about going on a journey so you have an awesome story to tell about the better world that you're trying to create. There is a process. We've seen other people in other places, in other cities, go through this journey of racial equity before, and there's much that we can learn, and we can also be an inspiration in that work and in that effort. So I'm really calling on our larger community to think about, if we have this principle, how do we turn that principle not just into like a thing on paper, but into a lived experience of folks folks all around the world? How do we make sure that we are doing the work to make this a space that not just says it is possible to be there, but actually doing the work to make it a place where people can feel welcomed and that they're brought into the space. And this is just one small example within one department of how we're trying to learn about doing that. We do not have the answers. We can just tell you the story that we've had so far, and we hope for you to be part of that story too. To think about what do you have control and power over in the work that you're doing as as a volunteer or part of an organization or part of an event, and what are the little things you could do that are within your power to make your event and to make this whole community one that is more colorful. We know Burning Man's got a lot of color, but we want to make it even more colorful going forward. And just an invitation to be in conversation and dialogue with you. So with that, we'll switch over to questions.
I don't know if anyone else's mind is exploding, but if you've got a question or if you've got something that you want to share that might have been inspired by this that you want to try in your regional group, your team, your event operations design, this is the moment to share out. Feel free to use the reactions to raise your hand so we can find you.
Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. I wanted hand up.
Hey, Ed.
Hey, thanks for all that information. It was mind blowing in a way, and a great roadmap for a lot of the work that others need to do. I don't know if you covered this or not, but can you talk a little bit more about what percentage of the Rangers have been introduced to this conversation? What do all the Rangers, have they all been through this? What was the reaction, and how did you deal with negative pushback or that kind of thing?
You say it like that's all in the past. We're still in the middle of it. I'm like, yeah, that's gonna be a thing one day. So right now, let's say I think people working on one part of the goals that Threepio went over, there are probably like 40 different people in different parts of the ranger department who are like actively leading a process. We also were able to present these goals to the leadership, so the Ranger Council is all aware of these pieces, and then to a larger operational meeting. So all the folks in like leadership and junior leadership roles throughout the department have all been presented with this and kind of know their space, know the like overall goals, and in many ways a lot of the kind of like individual pieces folks have kind of taken up on their own. It's not meant to be fully held. We kind of like we steward, we backbone, we dream, but a lot of these pieces are for other folks to kind of like to really take up in different pieces. A good amount of the work that we've done this year is in the onboarding process. Like we know that this is about culture and training, right? And so myself and other folks got a chance to work on the Ranger manual, the online course. So each year to become a Ranger, you take an online course that teaches you all the Rangerly skills. And we interjected a lot of racial equity and RIDE language and frameworks into those pieces. So before it would say like, the first thing you do as a ranger is nothing, right? Which means you're like sitting back and kind of like watching on the situation. We've introduced the idea that like it's not before it would say like look at the situation between the two participants, right? And two participants are having a fight. Take in information. What are the details? Kind of blandly is what it had before. Now it says things more specific to be like, what is the social power relationships between the two individuals? It makes a difference if the two people having a fight is like two buff white dudes, or if it's like a small Asian woman and a tall white guy. Like that has different kind of social, they carry different social um constructs and power within the situation. And if we're going to be mediators, we need to be taking into account those different things so that we're both mediating accurately, that we know when we engage, we're using the appropriate, culturally appropriate language, and that when we do the mediation piece, which is a big part of being a ranger, is in particular, we're not asking the folks who out in the default world always have to make accommodations to be the ones always making the accommodation, right? It's like, oh, turn your music down, right? It's like one thing if like two people are both blasting techno, but I think it's a different situation if like one person is blasting music that they never get to play anywhere else in the world. and they never get a chance to be loud, and Burning Man can be their only opportunity to be loud. I want to take that in to account in my mediation. So adding little ideas, tips and tricks like that is part of the way in which we're retraining and changing the culture. Attention to power and social capital, that not just that we hold, but also that the participants that we're working with hold.
I just wanted to touch on the second part of your question, Ed, about how to, what do we do with the pushback? I have taken upon myself, perhaps foolishly, to reach out to those rangers who have had adverse reactions to some of this stuff. And also Rooster has helped us with this too. Finding people in our community who have the patience and have the stamina to go have those conversations is hard, and trying to maybe separate or make space for those people who don't have the stamina so that they aren't the frontline people, they're not getting burnt out. I have taken upon myself to chat with some folks who are quite fragile about this and just kind of find out like, what's not ringing true for you? Where's the sour note in this? Like, what is the part of this that we haven't explained well enough? Because if we can bring it all back to the 10 principles, especially, for example, Nexus has a wonderful class on Hive about how to relate the RIDE work directly to the 10 principles. If it's really just about being kind, it's kind of hard if you can bring them into that space. It's kind of hard to argue that we shouldn't be kind or we shouldn't be inclusive. Like these are really hard things to argue about. So finding somebody that's able to have those conversations and just say, look, like, did we say it the wrong way? Can we change our wording a little bit to make this make more sense?
Other questions, curiosities, or if you don't have any, feel free to also use this space to share out what your group or team might be considering or doing regarding RIDE.
I'll actually add another note in terms of the pushback. I think that you may all feel like part of the pushback comes from a place of love, which is ironic. And that what I've seen for some folks, they're like, this has been my, as a white person, this has been my one space where I can like feel like part of a thing because I don't have community many other places. And I'm afraid that if you make this more diverse, then I won't be represented or I won't feel like part of it. And so a lot of my working with folks like that is to help them see that like the thing that makes them feel part of this larger piece becomes more beautiful, more diverse, more life-changing and transformative, the more variety of people that you have. So like it's very Martin Luther King-ish, but the idea is that there's oftentimes I think that love is more powerful than hate. And oftentimes love gets turned into hate because we have this mentality around scarcity. It's like, I love this thing, but there's not enough of it. So if other people get this thing that I love, then I won't get to have it too. And so part of what I try to do is to transform that scarcity mindset into one of abundance. And it's just like, you love this thing, wouldn't it be great to have more people from more backgrounds seeing how awesome this thing that you love is? And they're like, yeah, I am right. My ideas are the best, and everyone should be able to love this thing. I will work on making this more diverse. I'm like, gotcha. Like that, but it's also like a true and authentic way that I try to look at the world. Like, how do we create more abundance? And I just always remember the idea that there's never not enough bacon at Burning Man. Like there's like that's just not a thing that happens. We will make sure that never happens. Like you can't leave Burning Man and have eaten bacon and not believe in the value of abundance and the possibility of abundance to exist anywhere, at any time. So it's the bacon principle.
I love that, the bacon principle. Monty, from Lakes of Fire, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a bit windy out here. I'm sitting outside trying to get some sun. So please let me know if it's too loud. But I was inspired by a lot of what Elephant and Threepio had shared, and I was wanting to hopefully share some of the projects that Lakes of Fire has been able to accomplish these last few months to further our goal of radical inclusion. we have been able to recently add an amendment to our code of conduct that clearly states what we consider as our protected identities, as well as explicitly state our dedication to keep those identities included within our community and our events and keep them safe. During these discussions and during our own organizational RIDE working groups, there were a few questions that during my facilitation, I had put emphasis on to hopefully encourage reflection and hopefully a paradigm shift within our leadership. Some of those were, if we live in a default world where racism is acceptable, is racist symbols an act of radical self-expression? Is it radical at that point if it's what is promoted within our default society? Is our expression, if our expression is in turn keeping others from expressing themselves, is it still self-expression anymore, or has it become something else like oppression? We've also recently passed a proposal to change how our low income ticket program functions and turn it more into a need-based ticket, and how we as the organization consider and assist those community members that are seeking discounted tickets based off of financial need. Previously, there was an income cap that was considered in the application process, and the discount was, we had 70 half price tickets that were to be allocated. We've shifted away from that to instead calculating the dollar amount that was associated with that 70 half price tickets, and then equally distributing that amount to all of the applicants to offset the ticket price, as well as completely removing the cap of applicants that received it. So this year, the amount that we had allocated to that program was $5,250. We were able to apply a discount of $140 for those applicants, resulting in $10 tickets for our need-based ticket program, which we were really, really excited about. It was something that was definitely RIDE in action, and seeing how it impacted community members that had the financial need for help. It was heartening. It was one of those things that really helped us kind of feel like we are doing the right thing. This year will also be our first event with our disability, mobility, and ADA liaison. They will be able to, or they will be available to direct any potential volunteers towards positions within our organization that have been designed to accommodate any needs that folks may have. We also have a group of handy helpers who will be giving out hand jobs, and not in that way, but helping with their hands. How about that? That's a bit better. Helping with their hands, setting up tents, making sure that people have the assistance needed, physical assistance needed if they need it, and passing out laminated badges for folks who have mobility challenges, so that we know who gets a free golf ride, a golf cart ride whenever we're passing by them. But yeah, it was really, really incredibly encouraging to hear how this is being handled at Black Rock City and beyond. And I'm so supportive of this. I'm really happy to see the amount of love that's going towards this and attention. One of our other board members had said something very, very insightful recently that I have been marinating on a lot lately, that they had said diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice, and belonging is a feeling which results from our choices. So we need to continue to make choices that make sure everybody feels like they belong. within our community. Thank you.
Man, you just dropped a truth bomb right there at the end of our session. Thank you so much for sharing that quote from a fellow Lakes of Fire board member. And I want to thank you for joining us for our breakout session, our discussion about RIDE in action. If you have any feedback on this breakout session, you can share it in the feedback form that's going to be sent to you. You can stay connected in this topic by joining the Burning Man Regional Network Forum Hive group. That's where you can have follow-up conversations. There's also a RIDE topic in Burning Man Hive, which is a learning and connection platform that you can follow for conversations outside of the forum. There's also a number of courses that some people here have created online on Hive that can help support you and your teams regarding their journey here, and it includes courses like Intro to Anti-Racism, Collaborative Decision-Making, Conflict Resolution and De-escalation, Implicit Bias, Giving and Receiving Feedback. And I also want to end, if I know that we're all rooted in our regional communities, but if you are curious about joining Burning Man Project's RIDE, very nascent volunteer crew, you are welcome to do so. And Kentucky Sunshine will add a form that you can fill out to express some interest. Thank you again to you. I want to thank Ranger Elephant and Threepio for joining and sharing again this RIDE framework that the Black Rock City Rangers are exploring as a way to inspire all of us here. And also want to thank our tech mod KT and Kentucky Sunshine. And of course, again, to you for going on this journey. And maybe I'll see some of you at the trash fence. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.